What is the most scariest but still unexplained thing that you have experienced? I live in a small one-bedroom under-house flat, and as my cat walked past the bedroom door, she looked at the wall above my head, froze, fluffed up, and hissed. She started moving to the side really slowly, still fluffed up and staring that spot above my head. I looked up, but there was nothing. When she got near the side of the door frame, she bolted. I got up to see if she was okay, and as I walked past the TV, it went off channel to static. My cat wanted out badly, and I went out with her. The TV went back to normal, and chastising myself, I opened the door to go back in, and as I took one step and the TV went back to static. I stayed outside with my cat until she calmed down, and nothing like that ever happened again. I still think about it sometimes. Seeing three big bright circular lights above me randomly turn off while driving on a busy highway in NJ 287. I've driven a lot, and seen a lot of planes at night go through clouds. That was the only experience I've had where I felt, and still feel, unsettled, because the way they randomly turned off wasn't explained by cloud coverage or any other physical obstruction. To this day, I can't explain it without going down a major rabbit hole. The night before my birthday in 1996, I dreamed that I was walking around near the peak of Everest. It was snowing hard, but I was quite comfortable. There was a tent. To announce my presence, I sang Goober Peas. The two men inside were frightened, and I tried to calm and cheer them. I stayed with them a while and comforted them. A few years later, I read about the Everest disaster, in which mountaineers had to pitch a tent too high on Everest and died there. The night before my birthday in 1996. I can't explain it, but I hope I comforted them. I lived briefly in a rental home, which was owned by a church in a small Florida town, and which was built in 1908. Every night around 8 o'clock, I heard dragging, shuffling footsteps coming from the kitchen. If I walked into the kitchen, they would stop, and if I turned my head to look into the kitchen from the den, they would pause and continue the very moment I looked away again. This lasted for 5 minutes or so each and every night. It was one of the first times I had been left home alone with no one else in it besides my dog. We were in my room lying in my bed, and then my dog lifted her head and faced my door. I was confused at first until I heard light footsteps from the den. I then got up to look under my door, and when I did, I saw a shadow pass by my door. I couldn't see above the floor, but knew that there was definitely the shadow, and my dog also noticed the presence. I still have no idea what it was. When I was a kid in 2003, I had the Nickelodeon Time Blaster alarm clock radio, which I bought from a thrift store. It was so cool, but so annoying, and I didn't really listen to the radio much or need an alarm all the time at 10 years old, so I kept it unplugged on my dresser just as decoration. One night, as I was trying to fall asleep, it said "Good night, Jimmy," clear as day, but in that very distinct 90s clock radio sound. It was right beside me too, super unplugged. I wasn't sick or overtired or anything. I've never experienced hearing voices or anything since. Being so young, I tried to pass it off as some cute Jimmy Neutron feature and like some kind of battery malfunction. But they made those clocks in like 1996. It made a lot of annoying sounds, but not like that. And my name isn't Jimmy. While driving late at night, I fell asleep at the wheel and awoke just in time to swerve and avoid a head-on collision with an oncoming car. The adrenaline rush made me realize how close I had come to a potentially fatal accident. In 1989, I was driving on a familiar rural highway in broad daylight. I was rounding an easy bend and shocked to see a small town on the right side of the road. There's a sign, St. Vincent. A few of the things immediately noticeable were a shop called Webster Welding, an old-fashioned horse-drawn water pump for firefighting, several large poplars with dead tops, and black and white painted rocks along the street that faced the highway. I kept watching in the rear-view mirror and it stayed visible. I drive a few miles and there is a gentleman waving at me from beside his car. He's obviously broken down and I pulled over. A quick chat and I learn he's blown a tire and wrecked his rim. He asks if I'll drive him back to the town. No problem. And he gets and off we go. The town is not there. It's a dusty Alberta crossroad. This fellow and I just sat in my truck in silence. I raised an arm and my hair was standing on end. His too. He said all the trees were dead. Are we dead? Eventually I drove him to a nearby town. He simply got out of the truck and walked away. I remember it like it was yesterday. I could tell you what that town looked like in perfect detail. I once heard loud footsteps in my apartment at 2 a.m. while I was lying in bed. Checked every room, no one was there, and all the doors were locked. The scariest part? I live on the 3rd floor with no one above me. Slept with the lights on for the next week. I have no idea what it was, micro-seizure. But I was doing my normal monthly hike, and suddenly I wasn't. Everything was white like a shock to my system. It could have been an eternity or a microsecond, but it shook me up pretty badly and I just went, "What the hell was that?" My aunt said how I'd burn down my apartment and get kicked out. She was a bitch. Night 1, my fire alarm went off at 3 a.m. that very night. I did nothing. No smoke, no fire. Apparently it just does that sometimes. Small but weird and worrisome AF. Happened 2 more times. One time, I was on the couch watching TV when it suddenly went static for no reason. It had never happened before, and I got such a bad feeling that I grabbed my phone to call someone. The moment I pressed the call button, my phone froze and wouldn't work. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a voice whisper in my ear. After a few minutes, the TV came back on, and at the same moment, my phone started working again. I was home alone, and to this day I have no explanation for what happened. I heard footsteps upstairs in the middle of the night. I live alone. A random light below a tree in my yard, and the scariest thing is that it was in the middle of the night and there were nothing to produce light there. I was always a skeptic, but I genuinely can't explain the things that happened in my parents' home. I think the craziest one was one night me and my dad were watching TV in his room, with the remote sitting on top of the TV converter box when suddenly the remote flies to the other side of the room easily 10 feet away. It did not fall on its own and the TV switched to just static. No AC blowing, no window open, the converter box wasn't moved at all. I really don't know what it could have been. We were playing team tag at night back in middle school. A friend and I were hiding near a bush around a tree. Suddenly something in the bush moved and we assumed it was an animal. We threw a stick into the bush and it came flying back out, and a dark figure about 4 feet tall ran across the field into the woods. We freaked out and ran back to our house about a 12-mile away. My partner and I had some guy decide he was going to try to intentionally ram our car in a parking lot. We thankfully escaped unharmed after a terrifying chase, but we never figured out why he zeroed in on us. We were just minding our own business, trying to leave the lot. We still occasionally rehash it years later, but it makes no sense at all. I sat on an armchair and I felt someone sit up and out of the chair. A few years ago, when I was in my mid to late 20s, I was still living with my parents. I would stay up pretty late on the weekends cause that was the only time I had to myself and did not have any responsibilities for the morning. Cozy living room off the kitchen. It was around 2 or 3 a.m. I know that's the witching hour or whatever, and it makes sense, it's so quiet and the dead of night. It was pretty dark, but I could make out some things in the room. I either had the TV on or the main light on the lowest setting. Probably just the TV light or the fire still going a tiny bit. So fairly dark. I see a dark cloud move basically from like 6 feet from the foot of the couch where I was at towards kitchen. Saw it for just 1 second, maybe 2, followed by a fairly strong garlicky smell for like 5 seconds. Didn't really freak me out though, kinda was just, did I just see something and what is the smell for a breath or 2?